dear participants. Thank you for your presence on our session, Biting or Bitten Dragon. The session would be about corrosive capital in Kyrgyzstan, the research that was conducted by Peel Research Company with in partnership and with support of Center for International Private Enterprise. CIPE is one of 4 core institutions of National Endowment for Democracy and affiliate of US Chamber of Commerce. The organization is supporting development of enabling business environment and believe that democracy is the core of development of the society, of business, of private business. Okay, and today I would lead the session. My name is Przemyslaw Ozierski. I'm a researcher at Peel Research Company. Let's say my co-researchers, and at the same time on my left side, my boss and inspirer for this research, Gulnara Ibraeva, founder of Peel Research Company, and on my left side, my co-researcher, Elnura Omurkulova-Ozierska, so you can guess also my inspirer, my wife. So we'll start today, let's say, with the presentation of Gulnara about findings, what we found about China's, let's say, capital in Kyrgyzstan. During our presentation, we also explain what is corrosive capital and how we could research corrosive capital and how we could make the corrosive capital constructive one. Okay, so let's start with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Przemyslaw. My presentation called Chinese Investments and Challenges of Governance in the Kyrgyz Republic. First of all, I would like to say a few words about Chinese investment in the Kyrgyz Republic, about realities and prospects. As you can see in the table on the right side, different countries contribute, invest into the Kyrgyzstan, but the amount of investment, this investment flow is very different. More intensive color means more bigger money, and you can see that only China, its first column.
We want to also understand a lot of topics about
Диверсия. Only China invest more than other countries to Kyrgyzstan, and we have also the second. Can you bring back the slide? The second column is Canada, and their investment is related only to Kumtor Gold Mining Company. So. But significant number of corruption scandals in recent years also are linked to Chinese investment. And the research across the globe on Chinese investment also discovered a lot of corruption scandals on the highest level of national governance. So, and today we can say that political conjuncture and the economic and political situation in the Kyrgyz Republic objectively determine the lack of alternatives to investments from other countries. And within this presentation, we raise the questions: how and why, and by whom are investment realities perceived in the country? I mean, in Kyrgyzstan. What does Kyrgyzstan's strategy of fitting Chinese investments into the development of the country looks like? What are the further investment plans of China in the Kyrgyz Republic? A few words on the methodology. We used mixed methods based on desk analysis, content analysis of media, as well as field study, including interviews with government officials, business representatives, both Kyrgyz and their Chinese counterparts, and the general public. But to be honest, this field study was very limited, and it was biggest methodological challenge, because it seems that the topic of Chinese investment is very sensitive, I would say even painful, and close to researchers. And a majority of respondents refused to answer majority of questions, I would say. So, and it's in my very long research career, it is probably the first topic which was so much unsuccessful in the field. And the lack of information from respondents we tried to gain from the mass media, from internet sources, and used several internet sources in several languages, and mainly Russian, Kyrgyz, English, and even Chinese. First of all, I would like to say that when we speak about Chinese investments, we discovered among our perception of our respondents from different social groups very big discrepancy, and people seems very differently from different social groups, very differently imagine what China and Chinese investments are. For example, among ruling elites, we have got several statements which are reflected here on the slide. Representatives of ruling elites stated that Kyrgyzstan has already managed to get a lot of benefits from cooperation with China. And unfortunately, in terms of attracting Chinese investment, Kyrgyzstan lags far behind its neighbors in the Central Asian region. For example, Kazakhstan has much bigger investment flow from China. China does not interfere in the internal political affairs of the Central Asian countries. China does not benefit from political instability in Central Asia. Chinese order and discipline is an example to follow to our country. And a lot of elite representatives said that they recognize the specificity of interaction with Chinese partners, so-called guanxi, they consider as part of culture. And guanxi is a Chinese term which reflects the idea of networking, services, informal services to each other, etc. Intellectuals among our respondents and in internet sources also reflect several key ideas about Chinese investments. China is great. It must inevitably become not only the main source of goods, investments, and technologies for Kyrgyzstan, but also the main export market. In the face of China, Kyrgyzstan has a powerful but responsible and pragmatic partner interested in mutually beneficial cooperation. There are 3 modernization opportunities for the Kyrgyzstan, and all of them are possibly thanks to the Chinese investment. They mean project of China-Kyrgyz-Uzbekistan Railway, creation of an air hub and large national airline in Kyrgyzstan, and hydroelectric power station Kambarata 1. And people from population, from general population, they have quite opposite imaginary about China, and they say you cannot trust to the authorities. They are corrupt and ready to sell our land to strangers, meaning Chinese people, Chinese government, destroys the sovereignty of our country. It is better to remain without profits than to receive benefits from the mining and extraction of minerals from our land by the Chinese. By the way, 2 years ago, Central Asian Barometer discovered that the highest share among population, 35%, have negative attitudes towards China, and it is the biggest share among other Central Asian countries' population. They are killing our land, taking our women. It is quotation from anti-Chinese protests under ethno-nationalist groups, which stated previous year. Next slide, please. Some studies, for example, Schleifer, Vishny, Wei, they have shown that flow of investment is determined not so much by the level of corruption, but by the degree of predictability of corruption. The less predictable corruption, the sooner the flow of investment is reduced. So, and we can see that trends, as we already saw in our table, trends in the reduction of Chinese investment flows in the Kyrgyz Republic have been in place since 2016. Experts believe that investment in the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative may be further reduced as China reconsider its approaches to investment policies. For example, Frank Umbach, German specialist, said in 2022, the Chinese leadership learns that not all lending is a sound policy. Even if the contract seems lucrative on the surface, China needs solvent borrowers, satisfied customers and allies, not two-way sleight on hand defaults and angry citizens. Also, sinologists believe that a qualitative shift is taking place in China's strategy towards the Central Asian elites. Instead of influencing existing acting leaders, there is a trend to support pro-Chinese people, so-called sympathizers and enablers, and promote future politicians. So because they cannot trust to existing and acting leaders. And there are several strategies for the expansion of pro-Chinese elites, so-called sympathizers and enablers in the Kyrgyz Republic. For example, Hyotsuo support. Next, yeah, sorry. Hyotsuo, нету, предыдущий, да. Я боюсь во времени не уложиться. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Hyotsuo support. The term Hyotsuo means people from China living in other countries. This includes both China citizens temporarily residing abroad and descendants of earlier waves of Chinese immigrants who are citizens of other countries. So, and meaning Hyotsuo, we can see Dungan population in Kyrgyzstan. It is noteworthy that in the second composition of the parliament in Kyrgyzstan, there were 2 representatives of the Dungan ethnic group. In the seventh composition, which is like acting now, there are 3 of them, and 1 of them comes through majoritarian single seat elections that require significant financial costs and social capital, and the sources of his capital are unknown. Second so-called Hyatsawa group is represented by immigrants from China who received citizenship of the Kyrgyz Republic, and among them are also ethnic Kyrgyz population. It is noteworthy, for example, Adil Junus received his citizenship in 2001 and spent 14 years to become member of parliament. Orgalchata Ktobebu, she received citizenship in 2018 and already in 3 years received the status of member of parliament. Unfortunately or fortunately for 3 days, but anyway, it was great success. Businessman Hugo Dun spent 6 years after getting his Kyrgyz citizenship before he ran the local Kenyesh membership. Okay, next slide, please. And there are so many rumors and many media coverage about affiliation of our ruling acting president, Sadir Japarov, affiliation with Chinese government, because probably many people consider the term Hyatsawa in the meaning that no matter where the person was born, if his ancestor great-grandfathers were born and had citizenship of China, they are considered in China as compatriots. We can state that. Okay. You can see here a lot of facts which were stated in mass media about affiliation, the affiliation of Sadir Japarov with Chinese politicians or Chinese business sources. There are investigation of fact check, club media, and also civil reform platform, which is like public. All these facts were published, and investigations are available to you. I will not stop on all of this. You can get the sources in our presentation. They are in the last slide. But anyway, we can say that Adil Junus, who is officially recognized by Japarov as best friend, he still has very good affiliation with like government, Chinese government. For example, his wife's sister is the head of National Statistical Committee in SOAR, and his wife was also very had prior very high position. Also, we can say that ex-Chinese citizen spent 1 million som into the electoral fund for his candidacy for presidency, and the firm of Orgal Toktobebu was serving as free transportation, helping to the initiative of First Lady, Ladies Charitable Organization, etc., etc. And very interesting fact which we discovered when we analyze the decrease of presidents. We tried to look through all presidents' history, and in first months after getting to the position, all presidents usually they spent first 5-10 decrees in order to award and to thank those people who supported them. And our president Japarov in first 5 decrees, he signed the decrees on protection of property and support for entrepreneurship and protection of investments, and on the rapid recovery of mining industry of the Kyrgyz Republic. Next, I'm sorry, I have very few minutes. I would just name probably next strategies. Next slide, please. Encouragement for joint Chinese Kyrgyz businesses which are run affiliated by Kyrgyz state servants or politicians. And we have a lot of also investigation in here. For example, the case of Abzhaliyev, former member of parliament and very close relative of former president of Kyrgyz Republic, Jeenbekov. Politklinika and Klub Media investigated his involvement in the transformation of a company with a quota of state share into the private property of the Metal Can company, owned on shares with Chinese company by the wife of ex-MP Abzhaliyev. About this case, probably more will tell my colleagues later on. Next strategy is the policy of soft bribery through the support of sons and daughters like programs. Probably you know this big scandal about JP Morgan Asia bribery scandal, where this systematic bribery scheme of hiring children of government officials and other favored referrals who were typically unqualified for the position of their own merit were detected. And in our case, we discovered Daniyar Arabayev, the son of twice a member of parliament, oligarch in Kyrgyzstan, and his son, according to his personal sources and Forbes magazine publication, he got internship or trainship in London in Chinese company. And by the way, he was 16 years old at the time, and before it was the internship before he entered his bachelor study. It can be a conflict of interest, a situation that has potential to undermine his father impartially, and potential lobbying of a very concrete organization, Chinese organization in Kyrgyzstan. So last two strategies are technology and financial support for ex-citizens of China, and creation of Chinese soft power through infrastructures in the Kyrgyz Republic, Confucius centers, and the possibility of vocational training for Kyrgyzstani boys and girls in China. And we have, of course, some strategies of embeddedness of Chinese, ex-Chinese citizens in Kyrgyzstan. Next. But I will not stop here. Just will say that marriage strategy is one of key, and probably joint business with politicians or their affiliations is also good. How are the ruling elites responding, I mean Kyrgyz elites, to the reality of challenges of Chinese investment? I'm finishing. The rhetoric is that they try to improve the investment environment, but in fact, there are a lot of signs that we have legitimization of corruption. Can you show this slide, please? If we, in 2021, Kyrgyzstan worsened 20 positions in Transparency International rating, and have got 144 rank. but probably after adoption of legal acts in at the end of 21 and in 2022, probably the situation will be even worse. And what are, recommendations? Probably Kyrgyz government should develop own strategy for working with Hiachao to produce loyal elite that could transfer pro-Kyrgyz interests to China back. The investment strategy should clearly design opportunities for cooperation on the principles of environmental, social, and governance. And the goal is to get technological development instead of gray schemes to promote technological transfer. Of course, increase transparency and involve civil society in monitoring investment flows, and to provide free media with the opportunity to trace all the facts of the preferences of personal interests, sacrificing the public interest, and to provide public discussion. Clearly define what is public interest and how to determine it in a specific areas, because we have the law and not clear definitions. And finally, the Anti-Corruption Business Council should take responsibility for conducting systematic investment analysis and risk prevention. Sorry for time consuming.
We'll leave the question for the end, and we will move to the next presentation. What's important when you look at our presentation? Sometimes you need to conceptualize some issues, you need to label them, and it's just to give them some name for some issues, some processes that are happening. But we also need to be very careful and sensitive and avoid, and let's say, stigmatization. Because, for example, the marriage strategy, yes, that the people marry someone to do business better, yes. Okay, sometimes it is like this, sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's both, but it could be simply love between the people, and we need to be careful, yes, with such sensitive issues. Okay, so let's move to the next presentation, Elnura.
Thank you. So yes, following Gulnara Kubanishbekovna's presentation, we also need to define whether this capital, whether it is corrosive or constructive one, whether it is imported or indigenous, already existed environment in Kyrgyzstan that's allowed different corrosive capital, even not from China, but from other countries, to be grounded here and to continue eroding the law and society and bring it to the conflicts between the people and investors, and then it's like declining economic development. Next slide, please. Yes, coming back to the project that we are researching, that is supported by Center for International Private Enterprise. It's a global initiative that's for Europe, Eurasia, Asia and Pacific, and to Latin America, where CIPE, American-based organization, defined the corrosive and constructive capital as corrosive being the financing, whether state or private, that lacks transparency, and constructive that has transparency and respond to market voids. So this is definitions are from the website. That's basically which we try to picture in our case in Kyrgyzstan. Yes, next slide, please. Yes. Yes. So that's I was talking in the very first slide is about eroded environment. So how it's happens or happening is usually based on governance gaps. That's this weak regulatory environments that provide China or any other investments to exploit those weak regulations. But in today's case, it's Chinese investments, so we will talk about them mainly. And this weak rule of law and uneven regulatory enforcement are present actually in almost every transition democracy, and not only in transition democracy, also in developed countries. So it's just on the different levels and penetration is just also in different levels. But in case of Kyrgyzstan, it's highly penetrated and deeply penetrated in society and in investment particularly. So corrosive capital is basically exploiting and widening governance gaps. Next slide, please. Following also the methodology, because those representations that we are presenting today, it's part of one big research, and we try to follow this scheme for our methodology. We basically, as you see the picture from the right, this is corrosive conditions or corrosive environment leads to corrosive capital that indeed has corrosive effect. So it's all these social conflicts and declining in economic development in the country. We went through these 4 steps, like we identified the corrosive capital cases in open source media. We applied some impact assessment tools. Then we identified the involved actors. So it's like know your customer approach. That we try to see, as Gulnara mentioned earlier, that's about the strategies, how the capital is going to the business and how local and high-level rank officials are involved in such cases. Business actors, tactics and strategy assessment, and business environment gaps identification. Next slide, please. Yeah, just briefly, methodologies was a desk and field research. We had a field workers in the Sultansari area. We identified corrosive cases, involved actors. The limitation was, yes, the problem with transparency in investment activity. I here we're meaning that limited access to documents related to investment. So it was very difficult, almost to some extent impossible, to find any documents, any agreement that was signed between countries. And in order to look through them, to check to understand what are the realities, what are the conditions were signed among 2 countries. Then it was limited access to Chinese respondents. The business considerations, money love silence. It's like everyone knows that nobody wants to talk about how the money is done. Then the security considerations, we do know. Security considerations that business persons feel unsafe to some extent. Another one very important issue was COVID-19 travel restrictions. There were some people from Chinese origin that wanted to talk with us, but they were physically in China. There was impossible to, we had talked with their deputies, but it's not the same. When the person is doing some kind of business or running any kind of organization, we did have this with organization that's helping to small and medium enterprises of Chinese origin here, but they were stuck for almost the last 2 years in China. And it was impossible to find what are their strategies, how do they do their business, because some of them are all living here since 2000s, like for a longer period, being of Chinese citizenship. And next one. Yeah, it's just briefly, that's also was mentioned by Gulnara Kubanchbekovna. It's about that China became the top source of foreign direct investment in Kyrgyzstan, and it's accompanied with other like financial flows. That's also very important. That rapidly growing presence of Chinese capital is accompanied by notorious conflict between investors and local population, where stakeholders engage into the blame game instead of taking responsibility and accountability for their actions. So it's always like what we see in media, that's always like blaming the investors and not mentioning the local conditions, the local people in power. So it's always not about the one-sided effect. It's always the conditions that are usually created, but it differs from case to case. The next one. And we have this kind of dilemma that we do have the problem with legislative mishmash. It's like that the laws are not properly written. We have during the last 3 years we have witnessed the adoption of several laws and decrees that are not in line with let's say criminal code. The law on the economic amnesty is like contradicting to the any previously taken codes, criminal codes. There was attempts in 2018 that there was like written there some significant requirements for ecological standards, but at the end it's also not clear how it's monitored, how it's taken into account during this negotiation process, how is it in the end, because at the end we always usually have the conflicts between the local population and the investors, because there is a problem of ecological situation in that area where like majority of Chinese or Chinese financed companies are usually extracting this mining sector. So we also, yes, need to understand whether there is an imported or indigenous, or it's both. Next one. So as I mentioned, it's a huge research that we were doing for the last half a year. We've found the 8 cases in open source media that was like similar to the framework that we are working on. It's about the corrosive and constructive capital. Today we will talk about only 2 of them because it will not be enough time, but in the near future we're going to publish this entire research and everybody will have an access to clearly see what are the actors' engagement, what are the strategies being used. So just briefly about that, that's of course the going is also like very interesting names, so which we
Okay. Maybe I will go through like the going cold. This is about the modernization of the heating power plant in Bishkek, CHP1. But also about how the money were dispersed and what the problem were identified even by the parliamentary commission. So there were procurement problem, there were bid rigging allegation during different problems, even on China's side, as TPA was not only one company that wanted to pursue this project. So very complicated problem with different levels of the not compliance with the ESG. Paved with the good intentions, you know, all roads to hell. Yes, are paved with good intention. That's why the topic is like this. It's about China Road and Bridge Corporation involvement in modernization and development of the city road network in Bishkek. That is, let's say, controversial because it is grant. So it doesn't cost any burden to the state budget, but at the same time, it's causing controversy because of the, let's say, environmental degradation and deforestation of the Bishkek. So what was the preparation? What was the, let's say, disbursement of the grant that is still ongoing? Yes. So the third case is all that glitters is not gold. So this is the bigger case composed from the 4 mini cases. One of them is the case of the constructive capital, and Elnura would talk about this. It's about the Manson Group involvement in Makmal Zoloto gold mining plant development. The 4th case, very disputable one. We call this the Phoenix company. It's about how the kind of cable factory actually was reborn as the new company. Very disputable because now Metalcan, which is the Phoenix company, is working pretty well. It's a successful investment that is giving, let's say, new places of work for the people. It's giving, let's say, the profits to the state. Okay. The 5th The fifth case is error-prone or problem-solving approach. It's this case of Zhongda refinery in Karabalta. Huge investment, very strategic one for Kyrgyz economy from the energy point of view, but at the same time, investment that is plagued with many errors and delayed, let's say, investment. Sixth one, the corroded corridor. It's the case of the Abdulkadir's cargo network involvement in China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan transport corridor. We analyzed this corridor not only from the perspective of Kyrgyzstan, but also from the perspective of Uzbekistan. And we found the involvement of the Abdulkadir network in Uzbek companies. So that's why it's, let's say, transnational, I would say, corrosion, okay? Because the Abdulkadir's network was named by many, let's say, investigation, OCCIR, CLOP, for example, as, let's say, shadow one. Okay, and the 7, easy does it. It's comparative perspective on the development of logistics centers in Kyrgyzstan. We took the case of the failure of the trade logistics center in Atbashi and the Silkway center in Bishkek, which is actually working right now. And the 8 is cement storm. It's a case of China's involvement in the cement industry in Fergana Valley, but it's giving also, let's say, the overview for the whole Kyrgyz cement industry and also problematic investment that actually appearing in close proximity to Bishkek, and Elnura will discuss this. All these cases, they would be elaborated in our, let's say, collection of the policy brief in our book that I hope would be published as soon as possible. Okay, thank you. Elnura?
Yes, as I mentioned, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, that 2 cases, just briefly, because for my presentation, we have only 5 minutes left. Just 2 cases. The one is constructive capital example that was mentioned about the gold companies or Chinese investment involved in gold mining plant Makmal Zoloto. So it's the case when there was a competition of 3 Chinese companies for this mining plant, and at the end the Manson Group was the winner because it's provided or proposed to form a joint venture in which 30% would be owned by Kyrgyzstan and 70% by the investor. The competition was won and by Manson because it's offered to create more than 1,000 workplaces and invest $75 million from its own funds. To the other extent, it's also proposed to develop other economic areas differ from gold mining. That was the brick factory proposal. There was also a honey production plant and some other different areas to develop in that particular location. So why it's constructive? Because according to the open data, again, because that's how it's written in agreements or at the end or any other documents signed between countries, it was impossible to check. But in regards to the open sources that we have found out that this enterprise is at least provided the social kind of responsibility that demonstrated in employment policies oriented for local residents, employment project development, and assistance in the pandemic period. This kind of policies became as a crisis tested for this particular plant. And also worth to mention that after the last revolution in 2020, there was an attempt to seizure the power of this mining plant, but the local employers, they defended the, let's say, the Chinese business. They defended their mining plant from the Kyrgyz citizens who was trying to take over the mining plant. So in comparison to other mining plants that were owned or financed by Chinese companies. This was kind of precedent when the locals decided to defend their employer. Yes, and the second one. Then we have the second case. It's about corrosive capital. It's why we decided to present this cement storm in the Fergana Valley, because it's very actual for nowadays realities, because everybody knew, maybe saw in the news that there is plans to build one more cement factory close to Bishkek, but this is a highly polluting industry that's negatively affecting the local population and the entire environment. This it's as of 2022, there are like 7 cement plants in Kyrgyzstan, and 4 of them are fully operational. It's a Kant cement plant, Kyrgyz Southern Cement, Southern Plant of Building Materials, and Xinji Pirim. So the last 3 are located in Fergana Valley. So it's not only, when we are talking about the transnational influence of this investment, the Fergana Valley is also transnational, because we see how the rise of cement factories are not only in Kyrgyzstan, but also in Uzbekistan and in Tajikistan. So, and it's like the Fergana Valley once being the feeder, the bread feeder of the region that is involving or engaging many international actors for development, agro sector. And at the same time, we see that cement buildings that is like highly polluted, the grounds, the environment, that is like, there is like non-coincidence, like in the result indicates. So yes, next one. Yes, so this something that must be paid attention by international donors, actors, and national decision makers, that this is like this is a problem, upcoming problem, not today but tomorrow definitely. And so this is that, and it's also the call for Chinese investors, as they are the main investor in this particular area. They do have standards in their countries, and if they apply those high-level standards, green technologies in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia countries, they can become a potential of positive changes, and they can become an example for constructive capital, let's say. So this is a time when the Chinese investors need to rethink their strategy, and just to follow the specific green technologies requirements and standards. Yes, the next one. And among the recommendation for this particular case, we see this from the Kyrgyz side. There must be introduction of obligatory installation of real-time pollution monitoring systems as a regulatory requirement for cement industry in Kyrgyzstan, the improvement of procedures of environment impact assessment, obligatory compliance of Kyrgyz and Chinese financial institutions to implement additional politically exposed persons, screen requirement as part of their anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism programs, and international assistance programs to Fergana Valley, especially those related to agriculture, must to be revised, reconsidered in terms of this high polluting development of sector, high polluting sector. Yeah. Yes, just briefly how to respond. We see that analyzed cases demonstrate that investment projects with Chinese capital in engagement in Kyrgyzstan frequently fall within the framework of corrosive capital. We mentioned that there are some positive cases, but they are in minority. So the major cases that were researched, unfortunately, for Kyrgyzstan definitely, is with corrosive capital definition. So there is a lack of transparency and accountability that was also proved by many other research, but yes, what to do next? It's a question. So it's clear that governance gaps must be addressed, new regulatory framework created, and business practices must be adopted. So, and it's also not one-sided development. There should be also investors come to the table and discuss the possible, in particular, changes in this area, investment area. And it's also important to investigate and address negative effects of coercive capital as part of public-private dialogue. And the dialogue shall not be limited to any specific limited people, but should be open for all. Yes, this one. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you.
Elnura. Okay, it's why the case about the cement industry is important, because China is in cement industry is let's say main source of the financing of the development. It's actually China that is defining the character of the investment in cement industry. What we found in the three cases of the cement factories in the Fergana Valley, the Kyrgyz part of Fergana Valley, that they caused environmental damage. There was a problem with accountability, with transparency. There was a problem with the local dialogue. And also in all these cases, there was political factor involved. And involvement of politically exposed persons, MPs in this business. And that's why it's very, let's say, sensitive. And so what we can see in many cases that China has the opportunity to actually to correct its position. I would say that the Western standards, in opposite to this, is that you cannot finance the investment that it does not follow that it environmental standards. On my own, I heard about the investment that was oriented for the Uzbekistan and was from Poland. And it was about the construction of the factory of batteries. And actually, let's say the Polish exporter want to sell the technology that was not allowed in European Union. And Polish Export Bank refused to finance such investment, to finance the exporter, because it was against rules. Okay, so like the first thing in the investment and the image of the country that is exporting, primum non nocere. So do not harm. First, do not harm, and then earn money. Okay, so that was the logic of this, the investigation to these cases, to see how to move from this corrosive to constructive, and to find the alternative, to find the best practices. Okay, next presentation, it would be my research about foreign private security companies in Kyrgyzstan and the case of the China's private security companies. The topic is about perception and misperception of such companies. There is quite a lot of speculation and overinterpretation what such companies do on the ground in Kyrgyzstan. Okay, so let's move to the topic. Okay, what I did in my research as a first stage, I decided to research the whole private security sector and see how it's being developed and what is the regulatory framework of Kyrgyzstan. And the private security sector is regulated by the law on private detective and security activities. And what happened in 2014? In 2014, due to the, let's say, comprehensive liberalization program of Kyrgyzstan, license for private security companies in Kyrgyzstan was removed. Okay, the licensing obligation for private security obligation was in the same basket as the, let's say, licensing for the for the education and let's say other things. Yes, so they were in the same basket and they were removed. Okay. And what happened? We see the skyrocketing, the number of the private security companies, agencies, skyrocketed from 115 in 2014 to 800 in 2022. But those data, it's the companies based on the one of economic code 230000. So this is the basic code for the private security and detective agencies, but there are other two economic codes that could be used as such companies. And when we added such companies, current number of the private security and the detective agencies in Kyrgyzstan is more than 1,000. So it's easy actually to register private security companies. Okay, can we move this? Можно следующее? And the lack of licensing actually allow for easy access to the private security sector, and also to certain, let's say, I would say, the privileges, access to the weapon, access to the special equipment, and also it also giving the easier access for the foreign capital, I would say, access to the private security sector, which from the national security perspective shall be somehow controlled. Okay, so now the procedure of the establishment of private security company in Kyrgyzstan is the same as any other company. So simply we go and we register the company with the charter, and then we are in this industry. Or we are doing any other activity, and one day we decide to switch our activity to private security sector, and we just rewrite our charter. We even don't need to inform Ministry of Justice about this. Okay. Okay, so this is the citation. This is from the interview with Georgi Zozulia for the Sputnik news agency, and what he mentioned, that it's like that one day you can sell the sunflower in bazaar, and then you decide to engage in security activities. So you just change to your charter, and you are in the business. And if you are in the business, you have easier access to the weapon, to receive the permit for the weapon. Okay. So we have this license, lack of licensing, and it's giving, let's say, the legal loophole for the easier access for the weapon access. The permit for the firearm is still licensed, it's regulated by MIA, but still private security agencies is the highway to receive such permit. Okay. Okay, so this is the let's say very old, from 2006 statement by Mr. Akjol Isayev, the chairman of the Union of Non-State Security and Protection Services of Kyrgyzstan, and also the head of Dordoy Security. Dordoy Security is one of the oldest and the biggest security agency in Kyrgyzstan, and he alarmed in 2016 that security agency is the gate even for the terrorists to access, okay? And also I had the pleasure to discuss with him what are the problems of the private security industry here. And he mentioned that there is a problem with education, with the training. Also in PDC law, it's written that personnel must be trained. The training, the responsibility for the training is on private security agencies. They have the license from the Ministry of Education and Science, even not from the MIA, from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So So the curriculum, let's say the program of the training, how it's being executed, it could be flawed process. So we don't really know who is going to, let's say, protect us, and who is going, for example, in the trade centers, we'll see the security, private security personnel, but we don't know how such people were trained and who gave them, let's say, some special equipment, and what was the base to give them this. So the huge responsibility of private security agencies at the same time, and at the same time, lack of responsibility. Okay, so dilemma. Okay, so it's direct citation. The quality of training depends on provider. And there is a problem of simply selling certificates. It's not, it's Mr. Actual Isaev words. The person that is deeply involved in, let's say, developing private security sector industry in Kyrgyzstan. So it's very alarming. Yeah. And we're going through this speculation about the presence of the private military companies. Okay, for my presentation, I'm using the private security companies because from the PSC to PMC, there is several steps. Yes, several steps of militarization, access to the different, let's say, form of the equipment for weapon, different modus operandi, different standards of operation. Okay, and what I found researching Kyrgyz security environment, that private security companies in Kyrgyzstan do not have special status or legal immunity, and they face legal consequences as any other civilians. And it's also important for the people that they cannot simply, let's say, order as something. Okay, the ordinary security guard to do something, he needs to call the police. The police has the immunity, the police has the rights actually to use the force. Okay, so they are allowed to use special means fire according to regulation and only in self-defense. And what is important in the PDC law, there is a definition of service weapon, and service weapon could be given, and they private security companies could receive the licenses for service weapon, but it's different from the combat weapon. Their characteristic is different. The firepower is different. I will talk about this later. Okay. And so the main tool of the private security company is to monitor, to prevent, and to force, to let's say, to force, let's say, posture, to look in such a way that they would, let's say, psychologically stop, let's say, any, let's say, violent actions or the actions, criminal actions. Okay, so it's about the force posture. All right. So what we have is that the members of the private security sector in Kyrgyzstan, they state that China's private security companies cannot simply receive permits for combat weapons. There was quite a lot of speculation that the Chinese would come, they would be armed, they would have the combat weapon. No, they cannot. The law, the national law, does not allow for such thing. It could be done by interstate agreement. Okay, and what is also important to see that there are solutions in Kyrgyzstan, even for the Chinese companies, to protect their assets. And such solution is, for example, the security service of the Ministry of Internal Affairs that has the status of, let's say, the policeman, and they could provide armed protection for the private business on commercial basis. Okay, so they have the status of the law enforcement officer. And also, there is organized paramilitary units for the railway, VOHR, it's a militarized security service. That's actually, it's militarized, let's say, security organization units with a special status in Kyrgyzstan. And for example, they could be used to protect China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan railway project. No need for private security in such case, or they could work jointly. And we discuss with one of the representative of Ministry of Internal Affairs system, and he told us that there is tendency now to employ what this security service of MIA to protect the business, because it's more, let's say, it's more effective than simple guards. Okay. And going to the private security companies in Kyrgyzstan, okay, the main motivation of their presence here is to protect China as a business, both small and medium business. Also, this large state-promoted BRI projects. Looking at the motivation, we need to have in mind that there is also this feeling of insecurity within China as a business. We had 3 revolutions. Every time of the revolution, there was vacuum of security, and China as a business was targeted. It is documented. For example, the Goin center in Bishkek twice, burned twice, yes. And also there is the memory of 2010 OSH events for the China as a business, when China as a business organized on their own evacuation of Chinese citizens. So there was a reason actually to enter the business of the private security industry. Okay, and what is the direct ownership need for? The Chinese trust Chinese more than any other. Okay, I would say, but it is normal for any other, let's say, ethnicities, nationalities, and so on. So that's why if you enter the business, you control the business, you give the standards, and you give the additional credibility. But also at the same time, if the Chinese business is protected by Chinese, and you will see the Chinese protecting Chinese against, let's say, Kyrgyz people. So this is the double-edged sword, because it could create more problems. The people could perceive this in a negative way. Okay. And also the Chinese expansion in Kyrgyz private security sector could be also seen as a simple investment. We invest in the sector to earn the money. Okay. Okay. So moving fast, there are the 8 companies, China's private security companies that I identified in Kyrgyzstan. Only 5 of them, they are actively working at the moment. Actively, it's sometimes it's difficult to say who is active, who is not. They are registered. They still there are some moves, but if they are actively protecting, it's disputable. Okay. Можно? Okay. In my research, I distinguished several types. I used several classification of local China's PSCs based on the ownership. There are PSCs established with the participation of professional Chinese PSC, for example, Highway and Hung2 affiliated to Zhonghong Group, or Security Associated affiliated to China Security and Protection Industrial Group. Second type of the ownership, local PSC established by Huqiao, people with the Chinese citizenship residing outside of the PRC. And okay, can we move? And the second classification, they interlink. One form would be the perimeter and area limited private security companies. For example, Tata Security established to provide security for the trade center Tata. Okay, so the Chinese or Chinese investor, they establishing private security companies to protect their, let's say, localized business, and sectoral private security companies to provide range security services. And what I mentioned before, that sometimes we can see them as simply the business to invest, because even the private security companies with the Chinese ownership, they provided and provide security services, not only for Chinese business, but also for the local businesses, hotels, and so on. It depends on the level of the professionals. So it will be like a market competition sometimes just. There are some certain concerns, and they sometimes over-interpreted in media, in some research. But we could clearly identify personal and institutional connection between China's private security companies operating in Kyrgyzstan and China's state security sector. Okay, but there is huge but. I would say that that this is the common practice in many countries, that the people from the law enforcement agencies go and work and establish private security companies. So from one side, it's alarming because these private security companies could act as a proxies of foreign countries, but at the same time, it's normal that the people from the law enforcement agencies go to this sector. This is about the regulatory framework, to see this and control. And the next, we are not living in an international vacuum. And so the private security companies in Kyrgyzstan, they also operate in this international environment. And even the China's owned private security companies in Kyrgyzstan, they have direct cooperation with Russian anti-sanction to the Russia-Ukrainian war. Okay. For example, there was two weeks ago, 2Gs was erased from the Apple Store. As the Apple Store, because it's a Russian state-linked company. Yes, Security Associated is affiliated to the Kyrgyz branch of 2Gs. So the world is complicated nowadays. It's full of different sanctions, and also the Kyrgyz private security sector must take into consideration this. For example, also in Kyrgyzstan, some companies, they are selling the Hitera, the Chinese company Hitera communication equipment, that is recognized in the United States as a threat to national security, not national security of United States. Yes, so not so also disputable, but we need to consider such factors. Okay, and this would be the last very important things, because if you look at such photo, and that was the photo what's very popular in the China's social media between the, let's say, workers of the private security company. It's the photo from the highway security company, and it was misinterpreted by many that the Chinese acquired the weapon or imported the weapon from China. Okay, more solution. Okay, and it's about the overinterpretation, misinterpretation. Because okay, the weapon was not important. What we can see here, it's it's the most popular service weapon in Kyrgyzstan. For example, this Saiga, this semi-automatic rifles, family of Kalashnikov. Yes. So this is locally acquired weapon. And the second, it's legally acquired weapon, and the company published on its own website the registration certificate and also the recipient from the Ministry of Internal Affairs that they could acquire such weapon. Okay, so nothing to be scary, I would say. It's example of the transparency of China as a company in Kyrgyzstan. High level of transparency, they publish this, but without the knowledge of the language, without, let's say, verification, you could go into this trap of the misperception sometimes. Okay, so this is normal, let's say, practice, very transparent practice here. Okay, can we return back? So that was what. Okay, so recommendation. Yes, the recommendation it would be for the not only for the Chinese, it would be for any other. Let's say the private security companies with the foreign capital in Kyrgyzstan and the whole private security industry in Kyrgyz Republic. Firstly, there must be enforcement of monitoring over private security companies. Okay, with the potential to return to the licensing, mandatory licensing, yes, but also, okay, because there was this liberalization process and the sector is highly it's very liberalized, it shall be done with the consultation with private security companies. Okay, to enable them to transform, to modernize, to work better. Okay, so this close and structured cooperation between private security industry association and standard setting organization. Monitoring and regulation foreign capital in private security industry. Improved firearms licensing procedure by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Codification of law and regulation. Also, what I couldn't say, I couldn't find a list of approved firearms for private security companies. So we have the definition of the service weapon, but if there would be list, we could avoid speculation. And improved control over training and certificate issuance for private security companies personnel. Okay, there are capabilities to train very good personnel for the private security agencies in Kyrgyzstan. It's both in private and in a state, let's say, educational service. Ministry of, for example, there is Republican Training Center under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and they are training. They're training state security personnel, state security guards. Yes, so it could be done both by state, but also, for example, Dordo also has its own school and also produce very good, let's say, training materials, I would say. So there must be this discussion between the private industry and the state to work, to elaborate common standards and to work on this. Okay, so this is the more about the what could be done next, because the world is changing, technical equipment is changing, and so new standards must be adopted. Okay, there is a new surveillance technique, monitoring, communication equipment, and also drone technology is being developed very fast. Such equipment must somehow be controlled, because they could serve for good, but also for bad. Okay, geographic information system mapping in Kyrgyzstan. Also, somehow, this is the area that must be, let's say, investigated, how it could be used to secure the state, to secure citizens. And further in the investigation of PSC activities in Kyrgyzstan and in Central Asia, is important because such companies could also, let's say, emerge in conflict-prone areas, also in border areas. So that's why this sector also must be controlled, how it's present and how it's acting. For example, in such areas, Bitten, yes, region. Okay, so to avoid to be used as a potential trigger for the interstate conflicts. Okay. Okay, so I would finish here and I hope for questions. All the cases of the private security companies, they are elaborated and they would be published. So you could look what are the linkages in a very detailed form, I would say. Okay. Okay. Okay, so thank you. Thank you, and we can move to the questions. We still have 10 minutes.
We started later. Если у кого-то есть вопросы на уточнение, какие-то предложения для рассмотрения, да, или комментарии, будем очень открыты.
У меня как бы такой маленький вопрос. Это вот с онлайн, кто вот смотрел запись про публикацию, все-таки чуть поподробнее, когда она ожидается и как бы, ну, когда, да, и в каком формате, как можно будет как бы иметь доступ. И, может быть, второй вопрос.
Да, на самом деле у нас уже полиси-брифы должны быть вывешены на сайте СИП, да, на английском языке, но у нас есть еще договоренность о публикации с одним институтом, пока не могу сказать, но надеемся, что в очень близкое время. Да, и на сайте нашей организации, естественно, они тоже будут доступны.
У меня вопрос. Добрый день. Здравствуйте, Гульнара. У меня вопрос такого характера. Сейчас вот подписано уже соглашение о строительстве железной дороги. Ну, я эту тему уже 21 год, как бы первый раз слышал от Аскара Каича еще осенью 2001 года. И вокруг нее, конечно, очень много ходит разговоров. Даже сейчас, когда были последние события драматические на границе, то можно было прочитать как бы две точки зрения в соцсетях, да, кто-то писал, что, значит, Путин это все устроил для того, чтобы сорвать стройку, ну, соответственно, было и другое мнение, которое писали, что это Байден все устроил, чтобы, опять же, сорвать стройку, хотя, ну, на мой взгляд, это чистая конспирология, да, то есть именно из-за железной дороги договора. Вы, когда проводили исследования, вы каким-то образом эту тему затрагивали?
Тему железной дороги мы не затрагивали. Но при этом я и Elnura, мы раньше писали о теме железной дороги, что это очень полезный проект для развития Кыргызстана, который выводит Кыргызстан из транспортного тупика. Да, вот это важно. Раньше вот и этот, можно сказать, мотивация, она еще увеличилась в связи с войной, да, связи российско-украинской войной. Это еще более видно, что у Кыргызстана не хватает альтернативных путей доставок. То же самое для Узбекистана, я бы так сказал. Так что была ли какая-то мотивация в этом последнем конфликте? Ну, вы сами сказали, что это конспирологическое. Да, это конспирологическое, да. Я думаю, вот от конспирологии нужно уходить и в сторону реальных бенефитов, какие проект может принести, и уходить вот от такой оверинтерпретации, мисинтерпретации некоторых вещей, в сторону просто искать бенефиты, но тоже смотреть, что может пойти нехорошо, и предварительно уже работать над этим, чтобы это не случилось. Я бы так сказал.
Если можно, я тоже задам вопросы. конечно, не очень удобно находиться между обедом и задавать вопрос, но Китай это действительно сейчас очень актуальная тема, да? Мы видим, что мировой порядок очень сильно меняется, и мы видим, что роль Китая, она приобретает очень большое значение. Но у меня вот у меня, честно говоря, очень много вопросов, но я, наверное, сфокусируюсь на одном комментарии по всем презентациям. И один, может быть, вопрос задам. Один комментарий у меня по всем презентациям. Вот в некоторых, по крайней мере, для меня есть немножко как бы ограниченная связь между рекомендациями и то, что представлено в анализе. Когда мы, вообще вся вот конференция «Жизнь в Кыргызстане», она продвигает идею о том, что анализ и рекомендации, они должны быть больше основаны на данных. И иногда выводы на основе каких-то индивидуальных событий, они могут быть не совсем как бы репрезентативны, да? И вот для дальнейших рекомендаций, наверное, было бы хорошо избегать какие-то рекомендации, основанные на индивидуальных событиях, которые освещены в СМИ. И я хотела бы сказать тоже, что Китай как инвестор, он, ну, есть какие-то фундаментальные предпосылки, да, почему Китай у нас представлен больше в Кыргызстане как инвестор. Во-первых, у нас очень высокие риски в экономике, да, не каждый инвестор придет со своим капиталом в страну, где политическая ситуация очень меняется, где меняется экономическая ситуация. Вы тоже несколько раз затронули, что у нас нормативно-правовая база меняется. То есть риски для инвестора, они очень сильно повышаются. И со стороны государства, конечно, очень важно избегать, чтобы был какой-либо, как бы среда, которая создается для инвесторов, она должна быть одинакова для любого инвестора, который готов прийти туда. И, конечно, есть ограничения, вот о которых вы сказали в законодательстве, которые надо улучшить, но я не хотела бы их связывать именно с какой-то конкретной страной. Потому что как бы Китай, понятно, что он приходит на рынок, потому что это большая страна, и в других развивающихся странах на самом деле мы видим такую же картину. Второй вот момент, который я хотела... И здесь вот относительно этого, например, по использованию данных, например, было бы хорошо для того, чтобы ваши аргументы усилить, какова доля вообще вот этого коррозив, да, коррозийного капитала, по вашим оценкам, в общем капитале внешнем, да, который приходит, или во внешних инвестициях, тогда было бы понятно, да, какая доля и какая доля из этого Китая. Если мы в целом видим, что такое именно деструктивный капитал идет в страну, то что мы должны делать, да? Но не обязательно это присоединять именно там к Китаю или какой-то стране. Сама мысль о том, что капитал он должен быть позитивный, он должен быть направлен на там, окружающую среду, на устойчивость, то это важно. Например, как контраргумент китайскому я могу привести тот же скандал, с которым мы сейчас имеем с Центерой, да, и здесь у нас совсем другого рода капитал, и объемы намного выше. То есть насколько мы действительно говорим, что это, что важнее, да, и что действительно имеет влияние в стране. Вот. И в то же самое время в позитивном ключе было бы хорошо узнать, какова доля все-таки конструктивного капитала, да? То есть кто у нас на самом деле лидирует, кто у нас делает инвестиции, которые помогают улучшить, которые делают тот же вот кейс китайской компании золотой, да, которую вы привели, какие механизмы они использовали, которые действительно помогли им и и вести эффективный бизнес, который будет прибыльным, и в то же самое время учитывать мнение граждан, делать все для того, чтобы устойчивая среда была и так далее. То есть вот такие моменты было бы хорошо больше акцентировать. И последний момент вот относительно охранных агентств. На самом деле вот Китай сейчас имеет очень много преимуществ, да, на рынке. Да, и даже те же самые компании, которые охранные, на самом деле сейчас Китай выходит в топ в охранном бизнесе во всем мире. То есть это не только Кыргызстан, который китайские компании нахлынули и вдруг начали охранять. И на самом деле там большинство из них имеют государственную или аффилирование с государственными охранными компаниями в самом Китае. Почему? Потому что это по законодательству Китая так. Наши соседние страны, у них законодательство не настолько либеральное, как в Кыргызстане, и туда просто иностранные компании в охранный бизнес, они не могут регистрироваться и не могут вести бизнес. То есть это есть разница в законодательстве. Но я хотела бы сказать, что вот относительно качества услуг, все равно, когда у нас много компаний, рынок решает. Если я нанимаю охранное агентство, наверное, это в моих интересах изучить, кто будет охранять, потому что я доверяю им жизнь там своей семьи, или я доверяю свой бизнес. И количество вот этих компаний, оно тоже как бы объективно можно объяснить, почему, потому что у нас была нестабильная ситуация. Если я веду бизнес и постоянно идут какие-то захваты, революции и так далее, конечно, я буду нанимать компанию охрану, которая будет сохранять мое имущество и будет. И я буду выбирать ту компанию, которая имеет долгую жизнь на рынке, которая имеет хороший штат и так далее, то есть обученный. Я буду это в моих интересах изучать. И я не совсем увидела, как бы, почему именно мы Китай в этом ключе как бы выносим как бы, во внимание. Потому что здесь, мне кажется, больше упор надо делать именно на регуляторную базу, да, что не только, пусть там, хоть я не знаю, хоть какие компании идут, но чтобы они были профессиональные, и чтобы это оружие было использовано в тех целях, которые оно должно быть использовано, да, и это должно регулироваться законодательством. Вот, наверное, вот такие моменты, но большое спасибо, очень интересно. Я думаю, что очень многие будут использовать потом результаты ваших обследований.
Może ja tak i z końca начну отвечать. Да, есть такое, что частные предприятия, вот это тоже рынок, и тоже он регулируется конкуренцией. Но при этом, вот почему важны вот стандарты и другие вещи. Я скажу пример. В Оше была одна из школ, муж госпожи директор сделал частное предприятие, охранное предприятие, чтобы охраняло школу. Если ваш ребенок бы ходил в такую школу, вы не имели бы влияния на это, кто охраняет вашего ребенка. Потому важный стандарт. Бывает, что да, если мы берем себе охрану дома, тогда мы можем решить, кто имеет хорошую реному, кто имеет хороший веб-сайт, я бы так сказал, и смотреться мне эта компания или нет. Но бывает ситуация, что вы не в состоянии. Вы идете в торговый центр, там стоит охрана. Кто эту охрану взял? Как вы тренировали охранника? Потому вот регуляция нужна. Я согласен. Вот да, мы здесь взяли кейс китайских компаний, можно сказать, киргизских компаний с участием китайским, я бы так сказал, да, потому что китайцы не могут просто себе прийти здесь и оперировать. Ну, все равно иностранцы, я бы сказал, иностранцы не могут получить очень быстро доступ к оружию и заняться охранной деятельностью. Значит, ограничения есть, я бы сказал, входа. И да, нужно регулировать весь иностранный капитал, который здесь заходит. Но это вопрос регуляции всей индустрии. Взяли о китайских ЧВК или частных охранных агентов очень много спекуляций. Вот это взяли. Вот я тоже, честно сказать, хочу исследовать данный вопрос, посмотреть, как формируется маркет, как формируется индустрия, и если реально создают китайские компании какой-то угроз, и насколько она активна. Да, она активна в разных точках мира, это очень большая индустрия, которая растет, но при этом в Кыргызстане я бы не сказал, что зарубежный капитал, иностранный капитал очень активен. Я бы так сказал, даже последние годы, я бы сказал, последние с пандемией, ограничение определенного капитала китайского в частном tutaj секторе наблюдается. Да, я бы сказал. Вот пройду вот этот капитал, сказать, как поделить конструктивно и как тут здесь поставить методологию, долю. Вопрос суперсложный, я бы так сказал. Даже сейчас просто размеры FDI, размеры грантов, вот это все измерить в Кыргызстане очень сложно, потому что информация ограничена, транспарентность ограничена, сколько на что идет. Даже в проектах, которые выделяются на гранты, как идет procurement, как идут покупки, это тоже нехватка транспарентности. Поэтому мы взяли просто за основу кейсы. Я бы сказал, это это начало исследования. Вначале мы взяли кейсы, разные кейсы. Там есть очень разные финансовые инструменты. Там есть и brownfield investment, есть greenfield investment, есть разные инструменты финансирования инвестиций. И как вот аккурат в этом вопросе, как например, China Exim Bank подходит к верификации определенных проектов. Но мы начали исследовать кейсы, потихоньку кейсы, связи между компаниями, связи между политиками, как это влияет, посмотреть на это стандарты AML, QIC, то, что банки должны, международные институции должны использовать. И мы начали смотреть, где этого нету и что должно быть сделано. Ну, а потом следующий шаг, это есть выработка определенных хороших практик, тоже идентификация кейсов. Вот то, что вы сказали, вот это будущий проект, я бы так сказал.
Абсолютно. И на самом деле это начало, но я хотела бы сказать, что мы хотели сделать акцент не на конкретных каких-то там плохих инвесторах или ком-то, а изучать среду, в которой возможны коррозивные капиталы. Да? Это наша общая интенция. Сейчас была возможность рассмотреть конкретные кейсы, связанные с китайским капиталом. Будет, слава богу, возможность следующий шаг.
При этом я могу сказать, что мы видим кейсы очень разных стран, в этом очень развитых демократий, которые тоже имеют определенную коррозивность, я бы сказал, для системы. Это очень важно. Да.
Спасибо всем.
Спасибо большое.